There are people around him who have sympathy towards Khalistan.
Terror bleeds Jammu and Kashmir. Terrorists ambush army convoy in Baramulla on Thursday night. 2 soldiers killed in action among 4. Security ramped up. It's the second terrorist attack in Kashmir since the election. Less than 48 hours after Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping shook hands on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, their words have translated into action. It wasn't just symbolism, a real disengagement in 2 of the most difficult disengagement zones in Ladakh have begun in earnest. It's going to be a long way. These are the first very, very tentative baby steps towards a return to normalization that will hopefully happen over the next few weeks and months. But here's the good news, viewer. The good news is that patrolling by each side across the line of actual control, across their perceived lines of where the border actually stands, will resume by the end of this month. That's right. India Today has scooped exclusive information to suggest that the immediate disengagement in the Demchok and Depsang areas, which are basically in North and South Ladakh, will be completed in the next 3 to 4 days in such a manner that patrolling by both the Indian Army and the Chinese Army, patrolling that had completely stopped after May 2020 owing to the Chinese side blocking Indian patrols and the Indian side blocking Chinese patrols, those patrols will now be permitted to mutually resume before Diwali this year. Here's an exclusive report by India Today's Manjeet Negi and Shivani Sharma reporting from Ladakh.
More than 4 years since the deadly Galwan clashes that derailed India-China ties. The 2 countries finally began troops disengagement at 2 friction points, Demchok and Depsang, along the line of actual control. 5 tents have been removed from both sides at Demchok, with Indian soldiers moving back to the west side of the Charding Nala, while Chinese soldiers are retreating to the east side of the Nala. There are about 10 to 12 temporary structures and around 12 tents on both sides, all of which are set to be removed. In Depsang, many Chinese vehicles have been removed and number of Indian soldiers reduced. Patrolling is expected to resume in Depsang and Demchok within the next 4 to 5 days. Sources in Army say that disengagement will be completed by 28th to 29th of October. The disengagement operations are being closely monitored.
Broad consensus has been achieved to restore ground situation based on the principles of equal and mutual security. The consensus achieved includes patrolling and grazing to traditional areas. This is the power of engaging in continuous dialogue because sooner or later solutions will emerge.
During the key bilateral meet between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping in Kazan on October 23rd, the 2 leaders had welcomed the decision to disengage along the LAC.
सीमा पार पिछले 4 वर्षों में उत्पन्न हुए मुद्दों पर बनी सहमति का हम स्वागत करते हैं। सीमा पर शांति और स्थिरता बनाए रखना हमारी प्राथमिकता रहनी चाहिए। म्यूचुअल ट्रस्ट, म्यूचुअल रिस्पेक्ट और म्यूचुअल सेंसिटिविटी हमारे संबंधों का आधार बने रहना चाहिए।
With the big Ladakh thaw, India and China are looking to put diplomatic ties finally back on track. Shivani Sharma, Bureau Report, India Today.
The first time for us to have a
But China, as you know, viewer, is not a country that is known to be conciliatory is not a country that gives in to concessions, is not a country that is usually flexible when it comes to its aggressive military objectives. So how come China relented? What made China relent? What made China become suddenly flexible and agree to the resumption of patrolling and the intent, at least, to move towards normalization? We've got some exclusive information about what the Indian Army's 3 major actions were over the last many months, over a year now, that actually finally turned the tables and bought India many bargaining chips in order to put the pressure on China and get them to relent, get them to soften and become flexible. Number one, you've heard all about how the Chinese had blocked Indian patrolling routes, but there was a counter-blocking of Chinese patrolling routes in some Ladakh sectors. We will not name those Ladakh sectors, but there was counter-blocking of Chinese patrols. So therefore, India had a dominant position in those sectors. Second, the Indian Army took dominant positions in the Yangtze sector of the Arunachal Pradesh-Tibet border. Not in Ladakh, but far away in the northeast in Arunachal Pradesh, the Indian Army took some advantageous positions of dominance, which put the Chinese on the back foot. The Indian Army, number 3 point, took similarly dominant positions in the restive Asafila sector of Arunachal Pradesh as well on the Tibet border, which put the Chinese there on the back foot. This is an area where there have been multiple clashes between Chinese soldiers trying to intrude into Indian territory, and therefore the Indian side had taken dominant positions in Yangtze and the Asafila area, which had basically grabbed and wrested the advantage in those particular areas. Now, let me just show you what the map actually looks like of the entire India-China frontage. This is what the entire India-China frontier looks like. Parts of it are an undisputed border, parts of it are a line of actual control between India and China where the border dispute continues to happen. Now, you can see where the disengagement is taking place is in Demchok and in Depsang. Depsang is in the north, the northern part of Ladakh, and Demchok is in southeastern Ladakh. 2 ends of the entire standoff zone is where the current agreements, disengagement and hopefully de-escalation is taking place. And as we've seen in our report just now, the movement of vehicles and tents and troops has already begun. The resumption of patrolling will take place in Depsang and Demchok. The other friction points which actually began as part of the standoff and escalation in May 2020, that is the Galwan Valley where the 2 sides clashed, the Gogra Hot Springs area, which is the last place from which disengagement happened in 2022, and the Pangong Lake. There, disengagement has already taken place. Buffer zones have been created. So no further action for now is going to be taken there. At a later stage, perhaps there will be an agreement on the resumption of patrolling there as well. As of now, there is no agreement on the resumption of patrolling in the May 2020 onwards friction points, which is the Galwan Valley, Gogra Hot Springs and the Pangong Lake. And if you cast your eye to the extreme right-hand side of this particular image, viewer, that is the Arunachal sector of the line of actual control. And that is where the Yangtze and the Asafila sectors are. And that's where the Indian Army had taken counter actions against the Chinese, taking over dominant positions in those areas on the Tibet border, and therefore buying the Indian political system some bargaining chips, some a credible power with which to pin China down and bring them to the talks table as far as agreeing to a resolution is concerned. I want to go across to India Today's Shivani Sharma, who's been reporting these exclusive details since this morning. She has spent the last couple of days in Ladakh along the line of actual control, reporting on the effects of this resolution. It's really good to see, Shivani, that less than 48 hours after that handshake in Kazan, the actual movements have begun. There's no reason to celebrate or to over exaggerate what is taking place. It's going to be a long process. There is a great amount of verification to take place as well. But Depsang and Demchok, which have been 2 legacy areas of friction between the 2 countries, it is a positive move to see that things are starting to loosen up there.
Shiv, you are mentioning the handshake, and I must tell our viewers that the first tent dismantled the very day when Prime Minister Narendra Modi met President Xi in Kazan. And thereafter, it's been the third day, 23rd, 24th and 25th. And 50% of these structures and tents have been already dismantled. And next 3 days, this disengagement will be completely over. That means the timeline that was fixed for this disengagement was of about 1 week. And the army sources have confirmed to us that by end of this month, the patrolling will resume from Demchok as well as Depsang Plains. So the work will be over. And as we even speak, Shiv, the situation is dynamic. The work is being done at both these places, the friction points that you call the legacy friction points, where we've seen how both the armies were quite close to each other. The patrolling was not happening. There were temporary structures, sheds, tents, and stone huts that were being made there by both the parties. And now what is important here to understand is once the patrolling will resume, the patrolling will be done in a coordinated manner to avoid clashes, confrontation, so that they don't come close to each other once again, to avoid any kind of friction. So now the verification is being done and the videography is being done of the whole dismantling process there. The local commanders are meeting almost every day, even before this first tent was dismantled on 23rd of October. 22nd October, both the commanders at the local level, they started meeting. And this meeting is happening regularly. They are exchanging phone calls, they are meeting, and they are also verifying the dismantling process out there.
Okay, it's very, very interesting and important to acknowledge that work has begun, but there is a long and complicated path ahead before any meaningful changes. Remember, tents and vehicles and troops are being moved right now, but there are larger permanent structures which still need to be dismantled and moved out. The winter is upon us, which means it's going to be difficult for any large-scale movements, but all eyes will be on what else happens beyond this first layer of equipment and troop pullback. Thanks very much, Shivani, for getting us those first details of how that handshake is being visible and being envisioned on the ground by both sides very, very quickly. It was expected to take a few days, but it has already happened starting from the day of the handshake. Here are some details of what this disengagement actually looks like. For example, in Depsang, which has been one of the most contested, most complicated areas, as Shivani and Manjeet Negi have reported, a number of Chinese vehicles have already been pulled back. A number of Indian troops on the frontline positions have been reduced. Patrolling by both sides is expected to resume in the next 4 to 5 days. Somewhere around October 28th, 29th, before Diwali, patrolling will start taking place once again. Remember, patrolling has not happened there since April 2020. Local commanders are monitoring the disengagement, like Shivani just told us. Videography is happening. So it's not a question of one side trusting another. Each side is verifying what the other is doing, and that's why there will be stability. A full disengagement will happen, like we've been reporting, by October 28th, 29th. Clearly timed just before Diwali, so that there can be a troop reduction on the Indian side as well, and then the patrolling will actually resume. Similarly, this is Depsang in the northern part of Ladakh. If you scroll down now to Demchok, which is literally the other end of the standoff zone in southeastern Ladakh, 5 tents from each side have been removed by both the Indian and Chinese armies. Temporary structures have been dismantled. Indian soldiers are moving back to the western point of what is called the Charding Nala. Chinese soldiers are retreating to the east of that same Nala. Nala is basically a mountain stream. Local commanders are monitoring this particular disengagement. 10 to 12 temporary structures will be removed on both sides. 12 tents will be removed on both sides. Patrolling is expected to resume in 4 to 5 days. Full disengagement similarly by October 28th, 29th, before Diwali. And very, very importantly, in the disengagement zone, which have been grazing grounds for local populations of Ladakh, grazing by cattle owners will resume. That has been one big sticking point for local populations who, remember, continue to live in many of these areas where the standoff is taking place. They will be able to take their livestock for grazing in those areas. So it's a big, big step towards normalization, but there is a long, long way to go, and that bears constant repeating, because one must not be too eager to celebrate or show any euphoria. This is, after all, China we are talking about. Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, Distinguished Fellow with the Vivekananda International Foundation, someone who has served at many different levels in Ladakh, has served on the border at the line of actual control as well, is with us. He's one of India's best known army veterans. General Sharma, good to have you, sir. Thank you very much for being with me here on India Today. Your initial assessment, General Sharma, on India Today, we are being very realistic about what is happening, acknowledging that this is a positive step. It is always a positive step when there is some visible, disengagement taking place. But beyond the optics of this initial pullback, give us your reading of, how much further things will have to go, how complicated it will be, what is involved in this mutual verification process, even in these early days, sir.
Well, thank you, Shiv, for inviting me. Firstly, I wish to salute the two brave hearts of Indian Army who lost their lives in Baramulla. And I hope these two ones who was injured will be all right soon.
Same.
Now, as you rightly pointed out, this is a very positive development that has happened after 4.5 years on the Ladakh frontier. And things have been moving for a long time. There were buffers created in many other areas. These two sticking points have remained, which is Depsang and Demchok.
Yes.
Now, as your correspondents have been saying, and also what the army has already brought out today, the army commander has spoken, which says that at the Depsang, I personally perceive that Depsang is a very substantive movement forward, because we are allowed to now visit the to actually state that we have a foothold. We patrol the areas of Aksai-Chin, because Depsang Plateau is also part and parcel of Aksai-Chin.
Yes.
So till the time we start this patrolling, we were missing this out of our claims to Aksai-Chin as the entire area. So this patrolling points 9 to 13 will be a tremendous step forward. Now this dismantling of the Chinese, as we were told, on the other side of the Y junction were only based on vehicles. So they used to get the vehicles and they used to go back in the vehicles, and they had not made any permanent habitat. On our own side of bottleneck, we had created permanent habitat, which now stands dismantled. So taking Depsang only, the patrolling is a very positive step.
Yes.
And I think we'll have to find, since the previous protocols and CBMs were not exactly successful over a long run, those one which we entered from 93 to 2013, we'll have to now get into new protocols and new CBMs to ensure that nothing happens and there's no clash takes place. So maybe the timings will be fixed, or the strength will be fixed, and modalities will be worked out. But it's also true that the Chinese will also undertake patrolling to our own sector down from Depsang, and they'll come down to, say, for example, the post of Butse, which is the ITB post, which is the Chinese claim. Now, we'll have to monitor this also. While we are being permitted to go, the quid pro quo also states that the Chinese will come down into own areas, and they will be patrolling. So that movement closer to our road axis, closer to Butse post, will have to be monitored by us, and this is part of the quid pro quo. In the Demchok area, where, as you rightly pointed out, because of the Nala there was grazing grounds, and the Demchok villagers were having problems. I think these things will ease out now. They were face to face across the Nala. The troops will now ease out, they dismantle themselves. What is the modalities of patrolling into the Demchok Nala, or what some, as you call, Charding Nala, or how far we can patrol inside the Nala to the CNN junction or beyond? I think those things are not clear as yet, and I think those fine things will come out in times to come. But having said that, you have rightly been pointed out that these are baby steps. You mentioned baby steps, and I'll say these are very strong steps. But yes, they are baby steps, because the buffers remain over a large area, which is starting from Galwan right up to Pegong, so north and south banks, the entire Changchanmo Valley, which is Hot Springs, Gogra, all these are feeding into Changchanmo River. So then those buffers means there are people who are not very far from each other. Some places 6 kilometers, some places only maybe 1.5 kilometers to 2. So it's not that the tensions are easing off on all the sectors. These 2 points which were sticking have been eased out, but many other areas, maybe Gogra, the interstate distance is just about 1.5 kilometers. So those things will still persist.
Okay, we're going to keep a very close eye on these developments. General Sharma, thank you very much for helping us understand just this initial step of where things are at. Obviously, the story is far from over, and at every step, we will continue to bring you the latest with accurate analysis of where things actually stand. Okay, and now shifting focus to Canada. As Trudeau's desperate diplomatic war against India continues to boil and bubble, the layers of Canadian state hypocrisy and complicity with terrorism and organized crime are being peeled away every single day. Today, I reveal one of the Trudeau government's most brazen and suspicious actions, one that presents a new nightmare for the Canadian public to digest. On October the 14th, viewer, the Washington Post, one of the biggest and most respected American newspapers, reported that unnamed Canadian sources had secretly briefed them about how the Lawrence Bishnoi gang was being used by the Indian government to kill pro-Khalistani Canadians in Canada. Well, hours after this startling news break broke the surface in the Washington Post, a press conference was held by the Canadian National Police, the RCMP, where they repeated this claim that the Lawrence Bishnoi gang had been deployed by the Indian government to gun down pro-Khalistani criminals on Canadian soil. Now, the mention of Lawrence Bishnoi kicked up an understandable storm. After all, Bishnoi at this time was already in the headlines for allegedly masterminding the killing of Maharashtra politician Baba Siddiqui. So something was amiss here. Team Trudeau was clearly trying to use the high-profile name of Lawrence Bishnoi to amplify Justin Trudeau's allegations against India to a fever pitch. It made for a fabulous masaledar story that ticked all the boxes. By briefing the Washington Post and then having his national police say the words Lawrence Bishnoi, Trudeau hoped that that would be something that results in a firestorm. A firestorm would be lit and India would be on an embarrassed back foot. Except once again, it has backfired on Justin Trudeau. And let me explain how. You've obviously heard the name Goldie Brar, a man you've become familiar with since the killing of singer Sidhu Moosewala in May 2022. He's a Canada-based gangster who runs Lawrence Bishnoi's criminal empire from the Americas. Goldie Brar is a man who India has officially named in a dossier of wanted criminals. India has sought his extradition and provided detailed information on his criminal enterprise and activities. But here's where the story gets very interesting, viewers. So listen even more carefully to me. The Canadian government, which had placed Goldie Brar on a Royal Canadian Mounted Police wanted list, has mysteriously removed his name from that list. Why would Canada do that? What is the explanation? Goldie Brar is the Canada head of Lawrence Bishnoi's criminal gang. India has identified him and sought his extradition, but shortly after accusing the Indian government of using the Bishnoi gang to carry out killings in Canada, the Canadian government promptly drops the Bishnoi gang's Canada boss from its wanted list. I'm as confused as you are, viewer, because after highlighting the Lawrence Bishnoi gang as being an instrument of foreign interference and being used by the Indian government, one would have expected that Trudeau would have speedily acted against Goldie Brar and any other elements of the Bishnoi crime enterprise in Canada. Instead, Goldie Brar is no longer on Canada's police wanted list. There can be only three possibilities. Either Goldie Brar has been arrested, or the Canadian government is using or hoping to use Goldie Brar in some way to target India, which would imply Canada is once again employing wanted criminals as part of state policy. Or it could simply be Trudeau's famous ego directing the national police to drop any semblance of bowing to India's demands and therefore erasing Goldie Brar's name from the Canadian wanted list. The most obvious theory is that Canada might have something to hide. By dropping Goldie Brar from the wanted list, it could be seen as an attempt to minimize the Lawrence Bishnoi gang's profile, thereby avoiding scrutiny on how such figures were able to even operate within Canada for so long. The timing of the removal following the press conference where Canada highlighted Indian interference using the Lawrence Bishnoi gang confirms this. Think about it. the mysterious removal of Goldie Bra's name has only added more intrigue to an already tense situation. On the one hand, Canada has accused India of interfering, citing concerns about Indian intelligence activities on their soil. On the other hand, India sees Canada's actions or lack of those actions as a failure to address concerns about international criminal networks. But by removing a high-profile suspect from its wanted list, Canada has deepened the diplomatic rift, making it much harder for both nations to find some desperately needed common ground. Now let's just tell you what the Indian public thinks in response to a few questions that the Sea Voter polling company has put out. This is some data just to give you a sense of the pulse of the Indian people. Public opinion on the impact of the Canadian government's stance towards India. Well, 24% say significant, 30% say no role, 13% say it depends on the current events, 17% say opinion misrepresented by media. Now let's talk about current tensions and their impact on pro-Khalistan activities in Canada. This is very interesting. Look at this data. No significant change. There will be no significant change in Khalistani activity in Canada, says 21%. Their influence will actually increase, say 25%. And I actually agree with this because the spotlight on Khalistanis who were otherwise pretty much just unemployed, the issue was a non-issue, nobody really knew about what it was about, now suddenly is making global headlines. So they will be feeling a sense of importance and validation by all this media attention, including here. Activities will be limited, say 22%, too early to assess the impact, say 17%. Just a small glimpse of how the Indian public, or at least those sampled in this survey, feel about the ongoing India-Canada diplomatic storm. Well, coming up after this very short break, India's ambitious defense plans to build 2 nuclear-powered attack submarines have just been given the go-ahead by the government, and work, we can confirm, has started. We've got a special show coming up.
Motorola Razr 50 Ultra comes with Google Gemini.
मेरा रुतबा है मेरा सिग्नेचर. मेरा जज्बा है मेरा सिग्नेचर. जमाने से हटकर, दुनिया की सोच से ऊपर. कुछ बुरी तो नहीं? बेबाक है मेरा सिग्नेचर. Signature Finest Cardamom Seeds, a premium product from Dilbar Group.
Motorola Razr 50 Ultra comes with Google Gemini.
Hi, I am AI anchor Sana, bringing the top headlines for you, presented by Motorola. Protest against mosque in Uttarkashi turns violent. Hindu organizations announced Band after police lathi charge on protesters, Section 163 imposed. Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on his 3-day India visit. Fresh bomb threats at Tirupati hotels in Andhra Pradesh, investigation underway.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com.
The ultimate arbiters of sea power. The pinnacle of underwater muscle. Nuclear-powered attack submarines. Stealthy, fast, limitless endurance. That sinking feeling that the Navy likes. Finally, India cleared to build them. India's nuclear sharks. India and China have just shaken hands to at least try and normalize their disputed border and the big military standoff in eastern Ladakh. But remember, the battle for the Indian Ocean is still very much wide open. And one of the instruments that India has lagged behind China in a huge way has been nuclear-powered attack submarines. These are described by maritime experts as the true arbiters of sea power. These are submarines that have nearly limitless endurance. They're fast, they're incredibly stealthy, and India doesn't have a single one, while China has several and is constantly building more. The good news now is that work has begun. The government has finally signed off and sanctioned funds for India to develop and build its first 2 nuclear sharks. Take a look. They're the ultimate symbols of underwater muscle. Nuclear-powered attack submarines. Let's call them sharks. In the fleets of every major navy in the world, including the United States, Russia, China, France, and the UK. With Australia and Brazil soon to get their own as well. But India, even with an enormous maritime domain to protect and major threats in the Indian Ocean, doesn't have a fleet of its own nuclear sharks. But now, after years in uncertainty, the government has finally flagged off a homegrown project. Nearly 40,000 crore rupees have now been sanctioned for the development and construction of 2 made-in-India nuclear sharks. These will be the first 2 of at least 6 that the Navy hopes to operate. The good news is, India's nuclear submarine building program already has valuable experience. The Indian Navy currently operates 2 homegrown nuclear-powered submarines, INS Arihant and INS Arighat. Both are boomers, slang for nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines, lumbering beasts of the deep that carry long-range nuclear-tipped missiles, only entering the proverbial fight in the event of a nuclear attack on India. If the boomers are akin to bombers, The nuclear sharks, now cleared for development, are more like fighters. Agile, swift, and deployed by the Navy for everyday submarine operations. The question obviously arises, how are nuclear-powered attack submarines different from the submarines that India currently operates? The obvious first difference is that while the current submarines operated by the Indian Navy are powered by diesel engines and batteries, the nuclear sharks will be powered by a miniature nuclear reactor. Unlike diesel-electric submarines, which are limited by fuel capacity and battery life, nuclear sharks enjoy virtually unlimited range, only needing to head to a port for food or human supplies. Unlike diesel-electric submarines, which are vulnerable and noisy during battery recharge, nuclear sharks can operate quietly for extended periods without surfacing. Diesel-electric submarines may be able to stay underwater for a few days max, but nuclear sharks can stay submerged for months together if necessary. Nuclear sharks are more expensive to buy, but pay off in all the other ways described above. India's submarine force levels have been critically low for years now, making clearance for the nuclear shark program hugely welcome. But the Indian Navy has operated nuclear sharks in the past, except they were on lease from Russia. The first, INS Chakra, was a Charlie-class submarine that operated from 1987 to 1991. The second, also named INS Chakra, was a Russian Akula-class submarine that operated for a decade from 2011 to 2021. The Indian nuclear sharks to be built will be 6,000-ton boats powered by pressure water nuclear reactors and will be armed with torpedoes, anti-ship and land attack cruise missiles. Aimed to be the pinnacle of Indian naval capability with versatility in both offensive and defensive roles, these silent hunters will stalk enemy vessels, including surface ships and submarines, without being detected. If hostilities break out, these submarines will be able to also launch precise strikes on land targets using cruise missiles. This gives them an edge in both naval battles and land attack missions, further enhancing India's combat capabilities. Given China's aggressive nuclear submarine building program and a periodic attempt to push them into the Indian Ocean, only an Indian nuclear shark fleet will put the Indian Navy in a position to meaningfully push back. So the good news is that India is finally in line to get its own homegrown nuclear sharks. That is, nuclear-powered attack submarines. A veteran submariner once called them the real arbiters of sea power. And we're going to try and understand why this is such an important occasion and why the clearance for this project is one of the biggest milestones as far as Indian sea power is concerned. Joining us on this special episode of Battle Cry is Commodore Anil Jaisingh. He's a veteran submariner of the Indian Navy and also Vice President now of the Indian Maritime Foundation. Captain D.K. Sharma is a former spokesperson of the Indian Navy and now a commentator and consultant with Bharat Shakti. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with me. Commodore Jaisingh, I'd like to start with you by asking you why nuclear-powered attack submarines are so important to a maritime force like the Indian Navy. We constantly hear that, these are the real arbiters of sea power and they've been elusive for so long. The Indian Navy has wanted them for a very long time. They've finally been sanctioned as a program now. Why is this so important? Why does the Navy need them so much?
Well, I think this is one of the most welcome developments. Anyone in the Navy would agree. We've been wanting nuclear attack submarines since day before yesterday, not even today. And this program has been talked about for a long time. The very fact, as you mentioned, that we operated our first SSN INS Chakra way back in the late 80s indicates that the intention of going nuclear in our submarine capability was always there. There were perhaps a lot of other constraints which prevented us from going that far. And I think the focus being
I'll come back to you, Commodore Jaising. I think we've lost that audio with you. Let me bring in Captain DK Sharma in the meantime. Captain Sharma, will you take that question? Why is this such an important occasion for the Indian Navy? Why has the Indian Navy wanted these submarines for such a long time, sir?
Shiv, there is a problem with the audio. I'm not able to hear you. Can you hear me?
What a pity. We'll try and... I can hear you. If you can hear me, go ahead, sir. Commodore Jaising, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, go ahead. We lost that link, unfortunately. We're going to try and get our technicians to fix that, but please go ahead, sir. Yeah.
So as I was saying, the Indian Navy has always, or the government of the country has always felt the need for nuclear submarines. And it's not now, it's a 4-decade-old story, with Chakra having come way back in 1988 and the crews for that having started the training in 1985. But obviously for reasons best known, and I'm sure for very good reason, this capability was not developed over the years. But over the years, with the nature of the maritime threat having changed so much and the Indian Ocean having now become critical and the pivot in the future great power contestation that's going to happen, I think India as the predominant maritime power in the Indian Ocean has to ensure that it always retains the combat edge or the competitive edge, or whatever you may like to call it. And for that, as a Navy which claims to be a well-balanced, multi-dimensional blue water Navy, the SSN or the nuclear attack submarine is an absolutely necessary imperative.
Yes.
You would be aware that we had a 30-year submarine plan for conventional submarine building. You're also aware 2015 a study was approved by the CCS for initial design capability for an SSN, which was successfully completed. And thereafter, the 30-year submarine plan for 24 conventional submarines was modified to 18 conventional submarines and 6 SSNs. So obviously, the intention was there. And we were all wondering why it's taken so long since then for the CCS to finally give approval to get the program off the ground. From a maritime security power perspective, I think India needs these submarines very desperately.
Yeah.
We are a carrier operating Navy. We have to retain the edge. And we are also aware, as you mentioned, that very soon the PLA Navy, which is building nuclear submarine capability very rapidly, they've already got 6. And they intend, how many they actually build, we'll see, but they intend to have 12 to 15 SSNs by 2030.
Yeah.
Once they have 12 to 15 SSNs in their arsenal, you can be rest assured that 3 or 4 will definitely be deployed in the Indian Ocean. Because by then we also expect that China, with its 3 or 4 aircraft carriers, which it will have by then, will probably deploy a carrier battle group in the Indian Ocean.
Correct.
Besides its other ships that it already has. And therefore, carrier capabilities supported by nuclear attack submarines would be a very formidable threat to India's so far unchallenged position in the Indian Ocean. And the very presence of SSNs in an open ocean area, even though the oceans are vast, but for a large surface force, it is a threat. And definitely it restricts the options of the surface forces to operate unchecked, unhindered, if they know that there could be an SSN lurking around anywhere. The advantages that SSNs bring with their unlimited speed and endurance is that they can be rapidly redeployed wherever required.
Yeah.
To shadow a force, to follow a force, to detect a force, or to just go and interdict a force. So it is very important that if we have to retain the edge, we should also be able to put the PLA Navy under a similar kind of pressure as we would perhaps face when their SSNs operate. And therefore, it is very important.
Commodore Jaising, can you explain that, what you just said for a minute? Because, our viewers would be very interested to get into the details of what you just mentioned. When you said that the surface fleet of the Chinese will think twice about entering a certain area if they know that there is an Indian, nuclear-powered attack submarine in the area. What goes on in the minds of that surface fleet? What is the danger? Why is it such a daunting proposition?
The hydrology in Indian waters inherently favors submarine operations. The temperature profile and the sound velocity profile is of benefit because the water gets cooler as we go deeper, benefits the submarine. So a submarine will be able to detect a surface force much before the surface force would be able to detect a submarine. And particularly when we have, let's say, a carrier battle group of 8 or 10 or 12 ships, now that makes they make a lot of noise in the water. And a submarine gets a tremendous range advantage. Now, once a large carrier force gets a whiff of a fact that there could be a nuclear submarine operating somewhere near them, they could be rest assured that the nuclear submarine would have detected them. And that will put a lot of pressure on the surface navy captains to initiate anti-submarine warfare measures, which would restrict their otherwise they capable and unchallenged in the oceans. And while the Chinese SSNs could do that to our carrier battle group, we must have a similar capability. Let's say if we deploy an SSN, let's say in the Horn of Africa, we know the carrier battle group, Chinese PLA Navy battle group might be operating off Djibouti because that's where we think they'll probably be based. If the Chinese get an idea that there's perhaps an SSN somewhere in the Horn of Africa which is operating an Indian SSN, they would be, I mean, it may not constrain them in the sense that it's not that they won't sail, but they'll definitely be doubly careful before they take any such action which could prove detrimental to their surface forces.
Yeah.
So I think from that perspective, the SSN becomes very, very potent because of its speed, its unlimited endurance, its stealth, and its weaponry. Most importantly, its weaponry. The second big advantage it has land attack capability and its cruise missiles. So let's say we have a continental opponent, let's say like a western neighbor. From 600 or 700 miles away, we could open a new front for its land forces from the sea. An attack could come from the sea without them knowing where it's coming from because the submarine would be anywhere underwater. It has high speeds, it can redeploy very rapidly. So personally, if you ask me, I would have thought the CCS would perhaps approve all 6.
Yeah.
And they would have said that they can be built in tranches of 2 or tranches of 3. So I'm a little surprised why they only approved 2 at the first go. Because it's not only about the number of submarines.
Correct.
It's about creating the ecosystem for building these submarines. So once you say I'm going to have 6, it encourages industry also to make the necessary investment to ensure that because they're going to provide whatever they're going to make for 6 submarines and maybe more later. But now in batches of 2, you're not sure when the next 2 will be ordered or when the 2 after that will be ordered. So that could be a little bit of an inhibiting factor in encouraging industry to make the right investment because these are going to be indigenously built submarines.
Absolutely.
We're not going to use any foreign assistance in them. So from both an industrial and technological perspective, as well as from the force level perspective of the Navy, we know we need 6. The government has sort of tacitly acknowledged we need 6. But to build in tranches of 2 may be a little...
Okay.
May not be the best...
Let me bring Captain Sharma in also. I think we've fixed that link with Captain Sharma. I hope you can hear me, sir. Go ahead. My question to you was, why has it taken so long? You know, better late than never, obviously, when it comes to such equipment. But your assessment of this, 2 have been cleared. There's a larger plan to build 6. It's going to take a while to catch up with the Chinese, but at least now things are moving.
Well, Shiv, good evening to you. Sorry, I was having some problem with the audio. Anyways, I will take on from where you've left. Shiv, I will just take 30 seconds.
Yes.
The 30-year submarine building plan, which was approved by the CCS in 98-99, it divided the boats into 675, that is Project Scorpion, which is finishing now with the commissioning of Vakshir, end of the month, end of December. Then we have 675 India, where TKMS and Navantia are at the final stages. Who gets it, we don't know. Then was the Project 76, which was 12 boats. In 2015, the then Raksha Mantri, Shri Manohar Parikar, he had split this 12 boats into 6 SSNs and 6 to be made in India 100%. So that was termed as Project 76 and Project 77. Now, as Sir Commodore Ajay Singh is saying, yes, we have got AON for 6, but financial approval for 2. So to start with, we are going ahead with 2. And I'm very sure that the ecosystem knows it, understands it, because it was a huge amount of money. So it will only be 1/3 of it when we start with 2 boats. And these 2 boats are also going to take at least a decade.
Yes.
At least a decade. So we have the plans. What I understand, what I have been made to understand is that the CCS AON is for 6, but financial approval as of now is for 2. So it will go ahead, and there is no doubt about it. And parallelly, we are also going ahead with Project 76. So insofar as this 24 boats, they will plug in the gaps. Yes, there are capability gaps, but soon you will find, and you know, in building submarines and all, it will take some time.
Yeah.
But the SSBNs are online, you know it, S2, S3, S4, S4 star.
Yes.
So things are getting into place. And our SBC is doing a wonderful job. The Indian industry is chipping in more than required.
Yes.
And of course, the SP model the strategic partnership model of 75 India is likely to start anytime. Maybe another 2-3 months, 4 months.
But
So
Captain Sharma, does this, with the launch of the 4th SSBN, the nuclear powered ballistic missile submarine, and project sanction for the nuclear powered attack submarine program, does this indicate that India has now achieved a kind of rhythm as far as the know-how is concerned of building these submarines?
Shiv, there is no doubt about it. You see the speed with which things are happening.
Yeah.
Of course, it is not in the open domain, and it should not be also.
Correct.
Because once the boats are getting commissioned, it is being put out by the government of India. But insofar as the speed and the confidence which are, now our constructors, our SBC, the ATV, the private players, everybody is chipping in, and it is happening at a breakneck speed, but it takes time. It's a very, very complex machine, and it takes time. It has to go through various safety checks, and Sir knows it well, Commodore AJ, that the most complex thing which you ever build is a submarine. So it will take time, but then once they are out forever.
Very, very interesting, and this is something we're looking forward to very keenly, and we'll be tracking. Obviously, very little of it is going to be in the public domain. Whatever little that is tantalizingly comes out and we're able to discuss in this manner, we will look at in a very, very serious way, as we always do on India Today and on Battle Cry. Commodore Anil Jaisingh and Captain D.K. Sharma, thank you very much for being with us on this special episode, one that I have enjoyed putting together for all of our viewers, because remember that India has approved the building of the first 2 nuclear-powered attack submarines. But as our guest also mentioned, there's been some very welcome forward movement in the nuclear-powered ballistic missile program as well. In fact, India's 4th nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine, referred to very mysteriously as S4 Star, was launched into the water at the shipbuilding center in Visakhapatnam last week. Obviously, there are no images of that. It's completely classified. The submarine is bigger and more capable than the current 2 boomers, as they're called, in service, INS Arihant and INS Arighat. And this particular submarine comes after what is called the S4 or Aridhaman, which will be commissioned into the Indian Navy next year. The S4 Star carries advanced 3,500-kilometer range submarine-launched ballistic missiles like the K4, which will be tested very soon. So that's another big development, clear indication that India's nuclear-powered submarine program is booming from all sides. On this episode of Battle Cry, thanks as always for watching. The news continues on the other side of this short break. Keep watching India.